there is one single mistake that can happen to you in mushroom identification that is actually the most dangerous one. So when you are starting, when you write at the beginning, maybe you do have some interest in mushrooms, but you still really didn't get there. You still didn't even begin. You don't know where you are. You don't know where to begin. You just know you have curiosity and interest, and that's pretty much it. That would be maybe phase 1 of your mushroom identification journey, if you want to call it like that. Phase 2 is slightly bit more advanced. So in this phase, you already know some steps in identification, you know which resources to consult, you even can recognize certain amount of mushrooms, especially the unusual ones or very easy to identify ones. You got that covered. Phase 3, the next phase, is phase where you gathered a nice amount of knowledge. Let's say in this stage you are already above the average of common people, but you have to consider not many people have interest in mushrooms, so there is that. This is just to say you shouldn't be overly proud of yourself in this stage, but you know, you read some books, maybe you even talked to some experts, you went to mushroom exhibitions, you know how to recognize mushrooms, not only the, very common ones, very unusual ones, very easy to identify ones, or very famous ones that people usually forage for eating. No, you already know some less known ones, a bits of details here and there that are unusual, some facts, some trivia even. You are more advanced for certain than phase 2 and most certainly than the phase 1. But you know what? This is actually the stage where the greatest danger lies. You may wonder, okay, how can a person that's more advanced in knowledge be in more danger than the people prior? Well, here's the thing, of course, there is danger also in phase 1 and phase 2. We cannot lie to ourselves that there isn't. However, I think you already maybe picked this up if you talked to people. They're usually very cautious when you mention mushrooms and mushroom foraging. They're always like, oh, are you sure you know what you're doing? And things like that. There is this natural fear of the unknown, fear of things you don't have too much knowledge about, especially considering all of us know since childhood that certain mushrooms are very dangerous and we shouldn't ever play with them. So this is, let's say, general view of a lot of population, and that is the general view you will find in phase 1 and phase 2 people. That is actually what will prevent them most of the time to make this dangerous mistake, because they are still very afraid, they are very cautious, and you know what? That's a good thing. That is what saved a lot of people throughout evolution, throughout history, and it's probably saving more than a few of them as we are speaking. So the thing with phase 3 is the danger is in false confidence. This is more dangerous than being, I wouldn't say than being reckless, but then having less knowledge and being more cautious. Having more knowledge and being less cautious is more dangerous. Just because you read a lot of books and you know much more than general population does not make you invincible, does not make you not being able to make mistakes. And this is where you do make mistakes. You see something, you are almost sure it is something else, but it's actually something different. And well, let me tell you a little story about famous mycologist that I want you to remember every time you are rushing with identification and you are certain that you know what you're doing. Meet Julius Schäffer. Julius was a famous German mycologist, and one of the genus he studied extensively and wrote about was genus Russula. Here we actually have few of the Russella mushrooms just for the sake of today's topic and in honor of Julius Schäffer. Some time ago I made a video detailing how can you recognize it, what are its most famous characteristics. I made a small comparison with its cousin Lactarius genus mushroom, and you can all look it up if you wish. Until we get back to our Russellas we have here to prove a point, let's go back to our friend Julius. So Julius, German mycologist who was famous for studying genus Russella but also many other things, he also even developed a chemical test to help with the identification of Agaricus species. Now, why are we mentioning Julius Schäffer? We are mentioning him because he is only mycologist in recent times to die from consuming poisonous mushrooms. Mushroom that killed him was Paxillus involutus, and the story goes that about an hour or two after he and his wife eaten a lunch with these mushrooms, Schäffer developed vomiting, diarrhea, and fever. His condition got worse and worse. He went to a hospital the following day and he died from renal failure after 17 days. However, there is one important detail we shouldn't miss here. See, the danger we talked about earlier, about you being in the phase 3 and false confidence being an issue in identification, that was not really the problem here. Of course, Julius, as a mycologist, he wasn't in the phase 3, he was much more advanced. It wasn't a matter of false confidence and of picking something that was misidentified. It was actually a matter of this mushroom being considered edible in certain parts of the world and maybe inedible in another. So when they picked this mushroom, it wasn't a false identification thing. It was a correct, most likely, identification thing. It was just a matter of scientific knowledge at the time that was lacking. So yeah, even science can have false confidence. Of course, we are now much more advanced since a lot of years have passed, but this could be a call for caution even there. If you find some guides, especially very old ones, always take them with a grain of salt. And if there is a case of mushroom that is considered edible in one part of the world but not in another, any of those kind of, let's say, weird gray areas, to stay away from them and be safe. This book right here is Mushroom Encyclopedia, and this is the second part. The first part is tiny bit smaller, which is still too big, has around 1000 pages. This is actually one of the official books that you need to consult if you want to take an exam to be official mushroom forager. Let's say it like that. I'm not sure what would be the proper translation in English. Or you have then the next stage, which is kind of a mushroom expert. And the last one is a mushroom mentor. For some reason, it is actually defined you need to be above certain age to have this title, which I find pretty interesting. So let's see what does this say about Russellas, because we do have Russellas here and we want to be sure what they are. So let's see what does this book say about the Russella genus. This is where it starts. And yeah, it is in Croatian, but don't worry, that won't bother us. Here at the very beginning, there is one that already looks like, well, not like this one, but the other one. Yeah, maybe, maybe not. Not if you look at the photos, but when you look at description, where it says it can have variable number of colors of the cap, it could match, but could we maybe find a better fit? Isn't this a better fit? Yes, we are looking everything superficially, but even with details, which we don't have few hours of the video to talk about, even with the details, some of them could be confusing. Let's see more. A lot of these details can match our specimens in certain variation of the same species. That is the main problem here. Sooner or later, you will come to something that resembles your specimen a lot. Look at this one. Yeah, okay, but the gills are white. gills are creamy or yellowish here. Mind you, it is picked yesterday, so it can have an effect. But here it says gills can also be yellowish. Maybe we have what we need. Or do we? What about this one? This one can also be many different colors. What about these? These look much more like this one. But what happens next? You start to go further and there is this one, also reddish red caps, reddish pink, pretty much like our specimens. Everything, or almost everything, fits. More of them, some more of them, a bit more of them, and guess what? A ton of more of them. Do you know what happens here? The point is, Rassala genus has hundreds of individual species. And even though Rassala does not have life-threatening specimens, it still has toxic ones, which can make you visit toilet more than a few times a day. Here is the point. Even if you consult the most official, the best resource of your country or even the globe that you can put your hands on, even then you can make a mistake, because some of these things can be identified only with a microscope or looking at DNA sequence, which I assume you do not have means to do. But let's end up on the positive note. Do not let this discourage you. Actually, this challenge is what makes everything interesting. And, personally, this is actually what makes everything so thrilling and inspiring here for me. Even though it could be boring for some people, I guess if you arrived to this video, you are not one of those. The point is, you should not let your fear and caution paralyze you in your search for knowledge, and especially useful knowledge, foraging. Who knows when we might need that again. But remember, always remember to respect the things that you're picking and to be more detailed, to double check or triple check even everything, especially if you want to consume it. You do not want to put yours or any other life in danger just because you didn't bother to take a second look. Now, with this in mind, I just wish you happy foraging or happy identification adventure if you're just into that, and see you next time.